Good morning, folks. This is John Pettipas. I want to wish each and every one of you wonderful folks, despite the weather, a happy, holy, peaceful Easter. And it's 7 minutes before 12 noon on the morning of Easter Sunday, which is the 4th day of April 2021. I'm doing this without the benefit of electricity, so pray my battery holds up in the phone and you bear with me. It's a little bit darker than usual, but I opened up all the window curtains I could hear. This is going to be an early spring. On Friday night, the 2nd, I could hear the swamp singers, little crickets, tadpoles singing, but they weren't singing last night with the ice we had, and we don't have any electricity, but we're lucky. It only went out during the night. I spoke to a lady in Auld's Cove, and they lost theirs last night at 9 o'clock, and I spoke to a gentleman in this, lost theirs at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon. So we're supposed to get back by 6, so better days ahead. There's going to be, and when you see this, hear this, I don't recall ever hearing the swamp singers sing so early in the spring, so it's going to be early spring. I made it. This morning, I'm doing a special tribute. It's an Easter tribute to the late DAGMAR, D-A-G-M-A, and LARS, L-A-R-S, Anderson. It's an Easter tribute to the late DAGMAR and LARS Anderson. And there's an expression. In life, if we don't take a chance, we lose an awful lot of opportunity. I'm going to stand up and say this again. If in life, if you don't take a chance, you lose an awful lot of opportunity. ABBA has a song out, Take a Chance on Me. DAGMAR and LARS Anderson. Where do I start? An extraordinary, both of them, extraordinary fine people. They take and the debts of their generosity and the gratitude we all owe them collectively as a people, from Richmond, Inverness, Antigonish, Guysborough County, points to Margaree and Country Harbour, points between and beyond. It's only known to God and select few how much the debt of gratitude we owe them. Port Hawkesbury, Port Hastings, those places wouldn't, Frankville, Cleveland, I can go on and on and on. The houses that got built, what they call the mill, people worked at the mill. DAGMAR and LARS Anderson, young couple from a small community outside of Stockholm, Sweden, came here with a wonderful company, Stora Kopparberg. The former mayor of Hawkesbury, Almond Chisholm, once said, "You didn't know who came first, God or the pulp mill." That was Almond Chisholm's comment, God or the pulp mill. And he's not being sacrilegious. I see him in church, and he's a good man of faith. And he said to me, in some days, the rest of the statement was, I reminded him of a statement a few years back here. He was up here in church, and I said to him, remind me of his comment, and he said, some days you didn't know who came first, God or the pulp mill. Okay, now God ultimately comes first, but pulp mill is a close second here. They came in their late 20s, very early 30s, because they're both in the 90s. DAGMAR, I spoke to her a year ago, Easter Sunday. I always phoned her up on Easter Sunday, because for years, I've Pussy Willows, my video early in the week, okay, on Holy Thursday. They used to come in after, open the store 1 hour later on Easter Sunday, and they'd come in every Easter Sunday morning for years and buy an Easter lily after church. Wonderful people. And so I always phoned them up on Easter Sunday after they moved away to Truro, last few years of their lives, and DAGMAR fell and died in May last year. I spoke to last April, so it's in May the lady succumbed to, and she's a wonderful lady, and she died in May, and her wonderful husband, Lars, died, I just became aware of this past week, died in December. So they both went to heaven, they're both in heaven now, and they were wonderful people. He was the chief financial officer. They came here from the small town in Sweden. They worked for Stora Kopparberg, Great Copper Mountain, one of the oldest joint stock held companies in the world. It goes back, the story company goes back to 1200. So it's a 700-plus year old company. Late Jack Hardry gave me a book when he gave me a tour of the mill one time. Gave a book on the origins of Great Stora Kopparberg. They're a very storied company. They came to Halifax, stayed at Hotel Nova Scotian, and down it was a Hollisbairn Street in Halifax. A German couple lived in Oxford Street. Halifax off of Quinpool Road, was going back to Germany. They rented a house. They came to this area. They lived beyond Westbid. They lived out at Dundee, and they were cold farmhouse. Dagmar told me one time, she said, we woke up one morning, it was so cold, big drafty old house, and the furnace had backfired. All they could see was the eyes of one another from the soot. I think they slept in their Parkers, as canoe suits, but Dagmar smiled and says, John, I could write a book about all the experience we had, and they loved it. They have two wonderful, precious daughters, women now, and the little kid was young, and they were going to move into Hawkesbury, and it was a big snow coming. They couldn't when they moved out of the country house out in beautiful Dundee, Richmond County, they couldn't get through in the early 60s, a huge snowstorm, drifts and everything. The plows couldn't handle it, and somebody come across from, I think, the Points, West Bay Marshes, with a horse on hoofs with a sleigh, and got Dagmar and LARS was with the guy on the horse, and little baby all bundled up, and they moved to Port Hawkesbury. And they come in as customers for years. See, that guy worked 12, 14 hours a day. When the boom was on, by the time I was born, the boom was on. I was part of the baby boom, but the economic boom in Hawkesbury. The Stora did not want Port Hawkesbury to become a company town. And so he helped work with the contractors to get stuff straightened out. That wasn't his duties as part of his responsibilities with the Nova Scotia Pulp, but he did it. So that contractors got stuff straightened out. And a lot of those houses you see on Prince Street and Hiram Street and Straightview Street and all those newer houses in Hawkesbury built back in the 60s were built because people moved here. They moved here from everywhere. So New Brunswick, Newfoundland, the Harderies come from Newfoundland, the Pierces and Lockport. There's just people from all over. People from the mills of West Coast Newfoundland, from down in Lunenburg, Queens County, Shelburne County area, like the Pierces, people from New Brunswick, you name it. So anyway, back to LARS. At one point that mill was going to shut. They were going to shut the mill. And LARS had enough influence with the hires up and the management, senior management of Stora Copperberg, and said, no, stick with it. Your mill in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, the bales of sulfite pulp will get better. The market will improve. And they stuck with it. And they loved Cape Breton. LARS is a more reserved gentleman, but a very smart, fine man of great principle and character. And his wife was more outgoing, and she'd come in. I'd be making cotton candy with Margie on the machine in the morning. She'd come in with the car, big grey Ford car, and she'd buy a pie. And ABBA music would be playing on the radio. And one of the songs was, Take a Chance on Me. Well, Stora Copperberg took a chance on Nova Scotia and Cape Breton and all of us. And LARS and Dagmar, this wonderful, they never left. Even after he retired, their heart was in Cape Breton. They never left Cape Breton until they got very elderly and moved into a place up in Truro. They take and Dagmar being a more outgoing, a wonderful lady, very adventurous. As I told you already, she said, I could write a book. And LARS resembled it was a reserved, very private gentleman, but was an extremely hard-working, I'm going to repeat that, extremely hard-working, extremely smart gentleman. You ask him for advice on something, he'd write you a little report and bring it back. I think Dagmar did the typing, and I said, LARS, so you're doing this as better than people giving me paid advice. And he looked at me, and his meek and mild Swedish manner says, John, people pay sometime to get bad advice. He was just a wonderful gentleman. I repeat, is known only to God, very private people. That's the way God wants to do stuff. Only known to them in God in heaven, themselves in heaven and God, the people and place. I'm going to give one, but this pulp mill was remarkable with the recovery house we used to have in monastery, a recovery house. Many times they go there, and they'd help out keep that place going. So Dagmar and LARS Anderson, it's a brief tribute. We are blessed There's not one of us. I didn't work at the pulp mill directly, but many of the employees there, the contractors that work so hard, the pulp cutters, the machinery operators, the truck drivers, the guys on the train that haul the stuff in, supplies in, and haul the finished paper out. There's, to this day, even with LARS and DAGMAR, and they are in heaven. They were saintly good people, so you remember them in your prayers. We would thank God on this day of his resurrection that there was a fine young couple, DAGMAR and LARS Anderson, that little community outside of Stockholm, Sweden, that took and came to Nova Scotia and so loved Cape Breton. They stayed in Halifax briefly, would have come here in probably 60, 61. He was there to set up the counting system for Stora. He was there as the buildings were being built, the mill, the sulfite mill. Then later on, things got difficult, and they divided over. Rather than leave the area, they divided the overhead of the mill over a bigger thing and put a paper machine, and it came what was Nova Scotia Pulp again, NSFI. So there's a lot of retirees out there. Some of them are gone. Some of them are still with us. We all owe a debt of gratitude to DAGMAR and LARS Anderson. I used to tell him that, and he's a very modest man. But without DAGMAR and LARS Anderson, we wouldn't have, and we would not have what we enjoy in a series. Things perfect? No. But boy, oh boy, this young couple came over in late 20s, early 30s, and they lived in Cape Breton up until about, 4 or 5 years ago, to move to Toronto in the late 80s. So they spent 2/3 of their life in beautiful Cape Breton Island. I'm going to point this out. They love Cape Breton, and they love Nova Scotia. And we, in turn, love those wonderful people. So we say a prayer again for DAGMAR and LARS Anderson this Easter Sunday noon hour, and I better wrap this up before my battery runs out, literally. And it's now about 10 minutes past 12 noon, 8 or 10 minutes past 12 noon, on Easter Sunday, the 4th day of April 2021. And they take, and there's an expression in Sweden. It's a tacksamiki. Tacksamiki means thank you in Swedish. So we look up to heaven and we say, LARS, Mr. Anderson, DAGMAR, Mrs. Anderson, we say, tacksamiki for coming to Cape Breton and so loving. They love the people and they love the area. They never lost their love of Nova Scotia and Cape Breton. They both died here and went to heaven. So, tacksamiki, happy Easter to all of you. Thank you. Bye for now.